Yes, recording's on.
Oh. Hello and welcome to the Sprint 92 review. The sprint ended on Monday, August 13th. It was a standard 2-week sprint. Next slide, please. Right. As usual, I'll give the overview of the sprint. Carol will update us on the community. Dan will give us an update on the UI. For the providers, Dan, Berger, and Adam will give us an update. Gregg will update us on Automate. Another Greg T will update us on platform, Alberto on the rest, and Chris B on documentation. Slide. All right, so across 94 repositories, we had 403 pull requests merged this sprint. 81 of them landed in the classic UI, 74 of them landed in the core repo, and 71 in the integration tests. And then sprinklings in B2B and docs and in content, kind of all the right places. It seems like we have wrap and API there twice for whatever reason.
My bad.
Yep, no worries. Okay, cool. Next slide, please. All right, so this shows both the number of pull requests opened as well as the number of pull requests merged across each sprint. So this past sprint, we had 403 merged and 404 open, so roughly about the same rate. So that translates to what, 200 pull requests merged per week, as well as 200 pull requests opened per week. So I don't know, it's a pretty fast pace. Pretty amazing, actually. And we have 94 repositories in total, and 92 is that the number that what actually?
It's a sprint.
Oh, that's sprint number.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Good. That's just when the numbers were close. Threw me off.
Yep.
All right. So the distribution of the merge pull requests were almost 40% bug fixes and almost 40% enhancements, so roughly about the same. And then a little over 7% in tests and a little over 6% in documentation. So it seems things are moving along here. Next slide. All right, and then the repository health report. Green is good, red is bad. So let's see, the Amazon provider, the duplication went up by 8, so it's up by something like 7%. Maybe that should be investigated. And the classic UI, its numbers seem to be drifting in the wrong direction. So maybe just some paying some closer attention on the merging of the pull request there.
I believe with Amazon there was some additional files compared to last 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. All right. Next slide. All right, and over to Carol.
Thank you, Oleg. Oh, this is an echo. Yeah, so for the community update, we had a blog post, monthly blog post as usual by Drew this month on reckonings. So the link is over there. Take a look and read it. And now planning for upcoming events in the fall, and nothing is confirmed yet, but I'll of course share more information as we confirm them. I'd just like to highlight a few call for proposals. There's one in Netherlands. Netherlands, I think it's Unix user group in Oleg. It's in November, and the CFP is actually open to September 1st. It's indicated as August 1st in the Linux Weekly News calendar, but that's wrong. It's actually open to September 1st, so there's still time. And I think a year and a half ago, there was a talk on ManageIQ by Mike Hausman, and I think maybe it's time for an update if anybody's interested. Take that on. Then there's a lot more events, of course, and you can see them in the calendars in Linux Weekly News as well as Linux Foundation websites. And if you have any questions or any interest to find more information, you can always contact me. That's it for this sprint. Thanks, and next slide, please.
Mute button. Okay. For the UI, You can see the counts there. You can see there's mostly bug fixes, enhancements. There's still quite a few, but we're ramping down for Hammer. We've got most of our enhancements in, so might see some more in the next sprint or two. As far as some of the important bugs fixed on the tagging screens, if you click too fast after you click the category and then went to go click the tag, you click too fast and you would get double transactions, which is not good. So fix that by putting a spinner after you pick category, so you can't choose the tag yet. Some toolbar button related fixes on the physical server. Those are new tools, new buttons that are there, and they just needed to be tuned up. Also, the template summary screen had bad styling, so that was taken care of. In the chargeback area, you can do rates based on tags and labels, so now you can actually see those on the screen when you're looking at one of those chargeback assignments. The notification drawer, we had an area for tasks that we never took advantage of, and so for now we're just removing that and hiding that so that you don't see it. It was just kind of in the way. If we ever get to put tasks in there, we'll bring that back. For the dialog buttons, some of the service types were missing, so we added those in. Actually, there's some new service types, so probably had to add those in. On the dashboard, if you went to cockpit, you came back to the dashboard, it would actually try to jump you back to that cockpit session, which is not good. So we just don't remember that. We bring you back to where you were. As far as Ansible playbooks, the long description field is now being shown, gives you a little bit more information about the playbooks that you're looking at. And editing a VM while we were looking at another action RFE, I think. Notice that the save button is when you're editing a VM is not reacting to the changes that you've made on the screen. All right, next screen. As far as enhancements, we've added the ability to rename VMs. That was an RFE. We now show configuration workflows in the UI. Got some screenshots of some of these. Can do your database backups to Amazon's S3. There's a new alert type for physical servers, and then some V2V updates displaying successful and unsuccessful migrations in a notification. Warning when there's no enabled conversion host in your target cluster, and I mean that's like a warning because that's basically telling you before you run this, you need to fix that. And then there's some infrastructure mapping wizard changes for OpenStack. Next screen. So here's you can now rename VMs. Basically, you get a new button, and you get over there and you can do the rename. Now the rename does take place in the back end, and I think it's only for VMware for now. So actually we initiate the rename, and then of course VMware has to go do the rename, and then we have to refresh to pick it up. But you can now do it from inside CloudForms or ManageIQ. Next slide. Here's where you can now create service catalog items, not only from the Tower templates, but also from the workflows. So the job templates, it's not instead of just job templates, the workflows. And you can see there on the bottom right where there's now two sections in the choice. Next slide. Here's the backups. So you can do a ad hoc backup there in diagnostics, and you can also schedule a backup to Amazon's S3. Next slide. In V2V, there's your notifications of successful and unsuccessful migrations popping up on your screen, so that's pretty cool. Next slide. So here inside that right-hand select box, they've added a little warning icon, and you can hover or click on that thing and see that. By the way, you need to get this host enabled before you can at least get a conversion host enabled in your cluster before you actually run these migrations. Next slide. And now there's a choice for the provider. You can now choose Rev or OSP. That's a brand new feature. So now you can go from VMware to Rev or OSP. And I think that's it. Next slide. Yep, there you go.
Dan, I'll be talking about the providers today on the cloud side, and Adam will be talking about the infra side. Next slide. So in this particular sprint, looks like OpenStack and Lenovo were the lion's share of the PRs. Azure kind of went MIA this time because the stack stuff is on hold for now. Next slide. So on the Amazon side, a couple things to mention. First thing is that the S3 refresh now has its own worker. Before, if we were in an environment with a large number of objects, the EBS and S3 storage managers could take extremely long to refresh. And so now the S3 manager runs in its own worker, so it's faster and potentially uses less memory. We also added a filter limit. Apparently the Amazon API doesn't like it. Pass over 200 arguments at a time. So now we slice them up into batches of 200. And that slide there, or the image there, is just showing you the back to the refresh, that the S3 refresh is in fact happening in its own worker. Next slide. Nuage. So on the Nuage side, we added the ability to create subnets in Nuage. Now, those of you might remember that we actually mentioned this in the last sprint, but that was just the back-end work. This is the actual front-end work. There's an image that shows you where you can create it. And Miha also created a nice little 2-minute video that demos the thing in more detail if you want to take a look there. Next slide. Ansible. This is actually a follow-up to a previous Ansible Tower PR and Core PR that resulted in a single, more efficient query for configuration scripts and configuration workflows for the benefit of the UI. For Lenovo, I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Thanks, Dan. So this sprint, Lenovo followed up their schema change from last sprint, and now they are relating physical switches and physical chassis to events that get created. So now you have a little bit more information about where things that are happening related to events, where those are running. They also enabled provisioning for the Lenovo Physical Info Manager. All the code to actually provisioning was there. They just had to change something to say true instead of false, so that's confusing. And that's it for Lenovo. Next slide. On the OpenStack side, they updated provider discovery to work with SSL-enabled OpenStacks. This is good because people using SSL instead of non-SSL. So it's great that we're able to discover those now. They can also display private flavors now in ManageIQ, where before they weren't able to. When you're deleting a provider, previously it was doing hostname validation, or clearly it doesn't matter if you're trying to delete it. So that's a nice change. And they also updated the refresh to handle some bad request exceptions, which were getting raised up further and not handled properly. So that's a nice bug fix, and I believe that was backward to fix some issues non-computer shielding. That's it. Next slide.
Okay, for Automate, we had 37 PRs merged this sprint, 10 enhancements. The majority was around bugs and technical debt. For V2V, Fabian's been kind of cleaning up and hitting some other issues that we've hit along the way. So last sprint, we had some more changes when we're moving a VM, reapplying the settings that were on the source VM. So in this round, we got the retirement and ownership set on the migrated VM, as well as the cleanup items you see there. As Dan and Dan both mentioned, the workflow stuff in Tower, the back-end support, Lucy and Bill worked on that to get workflows supported along with job templates when you're ordering catalog items from, when ordering catalog. Yeah. That's next slide. Around dialogue, so Eric worked on finishing up a round of, had some spacing issues there. Finishing up exposing custom buttons across the number of resources that we had identified. So this was the last round. I think there's something like 20-some maybe resources that can have custom buttons assigned now. And the other things are mostly fixes in this area. I know we got a load on initialize for text boxes and text box areas, and just a number of fixes around a number of larger back-end refactorings that have been happening in Dialog. So this was all largely cleanup around that stuff. Next slide. This is the big one. Madhu was not happy that we weren't showing our code name when we started up the server, like Puma does. And so, not to be outdone, we got that in, and you know, he's still pushing to get some emojis in there, but we'll see. There's some pushback. We'll get a vote going or something. And then Drew, you finished up the custom button rate task. Last sprint we had export, and people told us that that's not very helpful without import. No, we're already planning import, so we added the import. Got that merged in this sprint, and then a while back we introduced the embedded methods, but we weren't actually using them at all in our model within the automate modeling. So you can create smaller methods and then include them into other scripts, so you don't have to duplicate that code. One of the areas we identified was just there was some basic logging stuff we do is common in a number of things, and we also see them in user scripts as well. So we wanted to start utilizing that functionality. So the first thing we did was being able to log the root and current objects. So we've created a new class in the automate model under system common methods, the utils class, and we've started to put, this is the first file that we put there. And I just put a clip of the basic logic. I stripped out some of the name spacing and some of the comments that go along with it to fit it in there, but you can see the basic calls, and then the argument passing in there is largely for testing. You wouldn't actually, most callers wouldn't actually pass anything in. That just helps our spec testing run a little nicer. So. Next slide. One more. And this one's just all around bug fixes in the sprint. So I know Patrick worked on the customization spec. That was a big one where it was just being ignored, passing it to VMware, and the retirement one, sending the email but not actually extending retirement. So that's a problem. And the quota cleanup is nice. The one I wanted to point out, the reconfigure one, the first one, where if you only change one of the items, I think we were reevaluating all of the areas, and something could have gone over quota, but you're not actually changing it, and it would cause it to fail. So now we're identifying the ones you're changing and only revalidating that quota area. That's a good one. And that's it. Over to Greg.
Thank you, Greg. On the platform side, 39 PRs merged, pretty big sprint for us. Bunch of enhancements there. So Libor added support for cumulative chargeback rates. So the way it was working is if you had multiple rates assigned, which could happen by assigning rates to tags, and you have a resource that had multiple tags that match rates. There was an arbitration that would take the first rate, and that's still by default works that way. But you can flick a switch on the report configuration and say have it accumulate multiple rates. So then it'll apply each rate and then accumulate the cost. And we added Danish krona to chargeback supported rates, currencies, and Yuri added the ability to create a default dashboard for a particular group. Before that, you can only get the default dashboard, and now you can create groups and assign a default dashboard to that, which is nice. And Keenan did some work for notifying users when we kill workers through an alert. And the nice thing about what he did is it uses the notification templates so that it's the event detail is actually formatted nicely without the permission you need. Before it was just saying it was killing a type of worker, you didn't know which worker it was.
That's an email, or is that?
That's an email, yeah, through alerts. And Joe V added documentation for the work he did on OpenID Connect on the appliance side that he finished up in the last few sprints. Next slide, please. And some bug fixes. Brandon fixed a bug with VM retirement from the global region for central admin. There was a couple RBAC fixes here where tenant admins were not able to see the users or groups that they created, which is kind of tricky for them to manage that way. And a couple optimizations. So we finally got the PR merge to drop the BIM performance tag values table altogether. Way back when in some other sprints, we actually reworked it so that that table wasn't even being looked at anymore, but or being updated. So now you just get rid of it. I'm sure for some users, the table's pretty big, so it saves some space. And Yuri did some optimization to migration that he did a while back for creating tasks for each job. So he had some purging to that ahead of it so that the migration runs a lot faster. And that's it for the platform. Turn it over to Alberto.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, so for the REST API, we had a couple of enhancements to Sprint. First one by David H., where we're allowing put and patch methods for editing templates. Just a simple example here, patching a template, updating the description. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so Douglas added the ability to turn on, turn off, and blink the location LEDs for physical chassis. And as you see from the examples here, we can do individual resource updates or doing that in bulk when you post to the collection. So, and these are the action names: blink, LOC, LED, turn on, and turn off the same. Next slide, please. All right, so Brandon added 3 more types that we support for requests. So now we can trigger the retirement of our orchestration stack, service, and VM retirement. Basically, these options come in through the options hash. So next slide, please. And finally, Miha did an enhancement where we can create cloud subnets, and that's a sub-collection of providers. So as an example here, we're adding a cloud subnet for a particular provider and the resource-specific details for that cloud subnet. And that's it for the API. Next slide, please.
Hi, for documentation in this sprint, we had 23 PRs merged, 19 of which were enhancements, and 4 of which addressed bugs. Some of those PRs included a procedure for exporting and importing analysis profiles. We modified a section on the data collection for Rev, added a procedure for discovering OpenStack infrastructure providers. We've added the V2V guide, and we've added the installation guide for SCVMM. Next slide, please.
All right. And that brings to a conclusion the Sprint 92 review. We will be back again in 2 weeks on August 29th. Thanks, everyone, for making the sprint possible. And thanks to all the listeners for listening in.